Joshua, a bedtime story of faith and leadership, Part 1. Settle into your comfortable space, dear listener. Let your breathing slow and deepen as we journey together into an ancient tale of courage, faith, and divine guidance. Close your eyes and allow your mind to drift back through the mists of time to a desert land where the stars shine brighter than diamonds against the vast canopy of night. Here, beneath those same stars that have watched over countless generations, we find a story that speaks to the deepest parts of the human soul. A story of transition, trust, and the eternal promise that we are never truly alone in our journeys. Feel your body relaxing as we begin this sacred narrative, letting go of the day's concerns as we enter a world where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, where faith moves mountains, and where a young man named Joshua learns that true leadership comes not from strength alone, but from surrender to something greater than oneself. Before Joshua's path could unfold, the memory of Moses lingered like the fading glow of sunset upon the horizon. He was the shepherd who had drawn water from the rock, the prophet whose hands had lifted a staff against sea and sky, and the friend of God who spoke with him face to face. Yet even the brightest flame must one day yield to the night, and so the mantle of leadership passed on. In that sacred turning, Israel stood between past and future, between the guiding hand of Moses and the steady courage of Joshua, who would lead them into the land of promise. And so, as the night embraces you with its quiet stillness, allow this story to unfold like a gentle river guiding you forward. With each word, imagine the footsteps of those who once walked this path, their hopes, their fears, and their trust carried by the same divine presence that continues to guide us even now. The desert wind whispered softly through the camp of Israel as twilight painted the sky in gentle hues of rose and gold. Moses, the great prophet and leader, stood upon Mount Nebo, his weathered hands resting on his staff. The same staff that had parted the Red Sea, struck water from rock, and guided a nation through 40 years in the wilderness. His eyes, still clear and bright despite his 120 years, gazed across the Jordan River toward the Promised Land. Behind him, in the valley below, the campfires of Israel flickered like earthbound stars. 3 million souls looked to him for guidance. But Moses knew his time as their shepherd was drawing to a close. The Lord had spoken, and his work was nearly complete. Yet there was one more sacred task to fulfill: the passing of leadership to another. "Joshua," Moses called softly, his voice carrying on the evening breeze. From among the tents emerged a man of 40 years, his face bronzed by desert sun, his eyes holding the quiet strength of one who had walked closely with both man and God. Joshua, son of Nun, of the tribe of Ephraim, had been Moses' faithful assistant for decades. He had climbed Mount Sinai with Moses, had been one of only 2 spies to bring back a good report from the Promised Land, and had stood beside the great prophet through triumph and trial alike. As Joshua approached, Moses placed a gentle hand upon his shoulder. "My son," Moses said, his voice filled with paternal love, "the time has come for you to lead Israel into the inheritance the Lord has prepared." The weight of these words settled upon Joshua like a mantle. He had known this day would come, yet still his heart trembled at the magnitude of the calling. How could he, a simple servant, fill the sandals of Moses, the man who had spoken with God face to face? "Do not fear," Moses continued, as if reading Joshua's thoughts. The Lord your God goes before you. He will not fail you nor forsake you." With ceremonial solemnity, Moses laid his hands upon Joshua's head, and the spirit of wisdom and leadership passed from the old prophet to the young warrior. That night, as the camp slept peacefully under the star-studded canopy, Moses climbed alone to the summit of Mount Nebo. There, in the quiet presence of the Almighty, the great leader gazed one final time upon the land of promise. His mission was complete. By morning, the children of Israel would wake to find their deliverer had joined his fathers, having been buried by the hand of God in a valley no man would ever find. When the 30 days of mourning for Moses had ended, Joshua felt the full weight of leadership settle upon his shoulders like armor, both protective and heavy. Standing at the edge of the Jordan River, he looked across its rushing waters toward Jericho, its massive walls rising like a challenge against the morning sky. "Be strong and courageous," the voice of the Lord whispered in his heart, echoing the words Moses had spoken. "Have I not commanded you? Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Joshua closed his eyes and felt peace wash over him like cool water. He was not alone. The same God who had parted the Red Sea would make a way where there seemed to be no way. 3 days after Moses was mourned, Joshua sent 2 men across the Jordan River as spies, their mission whispered like a prayer. "Go, look over the land, especially Jericho." The 2 men moved through the gathering dusk like shadows, crossing the swollen river under cover of darkness, their hearts beating with the rhythm of anticipation and fear. Jericho rose before them in the moonlight, its walls massive and imposing, built by generations who had never known defeat. The city slept peacefully, unaware that history was shifting like sand in an hourglass. The spies made their way through narrow streets, seeking lodging and information, until they came to a house built into the city wall itself. Here lived Rahab, a woman whose life had been shaped by harsh realities and harder choices. She saw the strangers at her door and recognized something in their eyes, not the look of merchants or travelers, but of men carrying destiny in their hearts. Without hesitation, she welcomed them in, though she knew the danger to herself was great. The people of Jericho had already heard the terrifying reports of what the God of Israel had done, how the Red Sea had parted before Moses, and how mighty kings beyond the Jordan had fallen before this wandering nation. Fear lingered in every heart, and the king of Jericho, wary of such a foe, had taken precautions long before the spies arrived. He ordered his soldiers to keep constant watch, to guard the gates with vigilance, and to search the streets for any intruders. Thus, when word spread of strangers within the city, the soldiers went house to house, determined to root out any who might threaten Jericho's walls. When the king's soldiers came searching, pounding on doors and demanding answers, Rahab hid the spies beneath stalks of flax on her rooftop. "Yes, the men came to me," she told the soldiers, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "but I didn't know where they were from. They left at dusk when it was time to close the city gate. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them." As the soldiers' footsteps faded into the night, Rahab climbed to the roof where the spies lay hidden. Under the vast canopy of stars, she spoke words that would echo through generations. "I know that the Lord has given you this land. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. But the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below." The spies listened to this unexpected confession of faith from an unlikely source, a woman who had recognized divine power while living in the shadow of false gods. In that moment, they understood that God's mercy extends beyond the boundaries human hearts might draw, reaching even into the fortress cities of enemies. "Show kindness to my family," Rahab pleaded, "since I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them." The men agreed readily, for they had seen the divine hand in this encounter. They gave her a scarlet cord to hang from her window, a thread of crimson hope that would mark her house when judgment came, a sign of salvation that would preserve life in the midst of destruction. As the spies lowered themselves down the city wall by rope, disappearing into the darkness toward the Jordan, Rahab tied the scarlet cord in her window. It fluttered there like a prayer flag, a testament to faith found in the most unexpected places, a reminder that divine love knows no boundaries of nation or circumstance. The spies returned with hearts full of wonder and reports that kindled courage in the camp of Israel. "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands," they told Joshua. "All the people are melting in fear because of us." Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. The river ran high and swift, swollen with spring rains and melting snow from distant mountains. Its muddy waters seemed to laugh at the impossibility of crossing. 600,000 people, their livestock, their possessions, their hopes and dreams, all poised at the edge of a river that had no bridge, no ford deep enough for the masses. For 3 days they waited by the river's edge, and in that waiting, faith was tested and strengthened. Children played in the shallows, unaware of the magnitude of the moment. Mothers sang lullabies that spoke of promised lands and flowing milk and honey. Fathers checked their weapons and their provisions, their eyes fixed on the far shore where destiny waited. On the 3rd morning, Joshua received a word from the Lord as clear as sunrise. "Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses." The promise filled Joshua's heart like warm honey, sweet and strengthening. He called the people together, his voice carrying across the vast encampment. "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you." That night, as cooking fires dotted the camp like earthbound stars, families prepared their hearts and their belongings. They washed their clothes, said their prayers, and dreamed of the land across the water. Dawn broke with unusual stillness, as though creation itself held its breath. The camp of Israel stirred under the morning light, and all eyes turned to Joshua. He commanded the people, "When you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God carried by the Levitical priests, move out from your places and follow it." The priests lifted the sacred ark and walked toward the Jordan, whose waters at harvest season rushed fierce and deep. As their feet touched the river's edge, the miracle unfolded. Upstream, the waters piled up in a great heap. Downstream, they ran away toward the Dead Sea, leaving dry ground behind. In the center of the riverbed, the priests stood firm, holding the ark while the entire nation crossed over. Children skipped across the stones, elders walked with tears of joy, and mothers carried infants who would grow up not as wanderers but as heirs to the promise. When the people had all crossed, Joshua chose 12 men to take 12 stones from the Jordan. "In the future," he said, "when your children ask, 'What do these stones mean?' tell them, 'The waters of the Jordan stop before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord.' These stones will be a memorial forever." At evening, as the priests stepped onto dry land, the river resumed its course. To the eye, the Jordan flowed as it had for ages, but for Israel everything was changed. A people who had wandered were now a people who had arrived at the Promised Land. The long journey was over, and the time of promise had begun. The city watched nervously as the Israelites made camp at Gilgal, offering sacrifices and celebrating their first Passover in the Promised Land. The manna that had fed them in the wilderness ceased, and they ate the produce of Canaan, grain and fruit that tasted of home, of arrival, of dreams fulfilled. As Joshua surveyed Jericho's fortifications, calculating the impossibility of siege or assault, a figure appeared before him. A man with a drawn sword, standing with the authority of heaven itself. "Are you for us or for our enemies?" Joshua asked. "Neither," the commander of the Lord's army replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord I have now come." Joshua fell face down in reverence, understanding that this battle belonged not to human strategy but to divine purpose. "Remove your sandals," the visitor commanded, "for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua obeyed, his heart filling with the same awe that Moses had felt at the burning bush. The Lord's strategy was unlike any military manual. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout, then the wall of the city will collapse. For 6 days, the procession circled Jericho in solemn silence. Armed men, priests with trumpets, the Ark of the Covenant, and more armed men behind it. The rhythm of their feet became a drumbeat of faith, steady and patient. Inside the city, people pressed their faces to windows and climbed to rooftops, watching this strange siege that involved no battering rams, no scaling ladders, only walking and waiting. Rahab watched intently from her high window, where the scarlet cords still swayed against the rough stones of the wall. That simple thread of crimson had become her lifeline, a silent covenant between her trembling heart and the unseen God of Israel. Inside her house, her parents, her brothers, her sisters, and all their children huddled together, their whispers hushed, their faces pale with dread. She had gathered them as the spies had instructed, trusting in a promise spoken under starlight by strangers who had vanished into the hills and whom she never saw again. The night before, she had not slept, for her soul was torn between 2 worlds: fear for her city, whose gates had shut in desperate defiance, and faith in the God whose power was already shaking nations. When dawn broke on the 7th day, the air itself felt tense, as though the heavens leaned close to witness what would unfold. From her vantage point, Rahab saw the Israelite army emerge with solemn order, led by priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant, the symbol of a God unlike any she had ever known. 7 times they encircled the city, their sandaled feet stirring the dust, their ram's horns sending forth notes that echoed and reverberated against the stone ramparts. The sound was strange and haunting, neither war cry nor song of triumph, but something older, deeper, as if the very earth responded to the breath of those trumpets. Each circuit drew the tension tighter. The murmurs of Jericho's defenders grew more frantic, and the pounding in Rahab's chest became more fierce. On the seventh circuit, the marchers halted. A stillness fell, heavy and complete, as if creation itself held its breath. Then Joshua's voice rang out, clear and commanding across the valley. "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." His words rolled like fire across the multitude, igniting their spirits. The shout that arose was not mere noise. It was the voice of faith made audible, the united cry of a people laying claim to their inheritance, the roar of thousands declaring trust in the God who had parted seas and stopped rivers. At that instant, the massive walls of Jericho began to tremble. Stones quivered and shifted, cracks spread like lightning through their ancient foundations, and with a deafening roar, the fortress of Canaan's pride collapsed into heaps of rubble, swallowed in a choking cloud of dust and falling ash. The ground itself shook beneath the weight of ruin, yet one section alone remained untouched. The very portion where Rahab's house was built, marked by the scarlet cord that fluttered in the morning wind like a banner of mercy. While destruction thundered all around, that crimson sign stood as witness to the faith of one woman who had chosen the God of Israel over the gods of her own city. As the Israelite soldiers surged forward, pouring into the shattered streets of Jericho, Joshua remembered the oath made in secret beneath the cover of night to a woman of faith. He commanded his men, "Go into Rahab's house and bring her out and all who belong to her, as you have promised." And so it was done. Rahab, her parents, her brothers and sisters, and all who belonged to her were led safely out from the ruins of their doomed city. No longer did she stand apart upon the walls of Jericho. Now she walked among the people of Israel, received into their camp, sheltered beneath the covenant of the God she had chosen to trust. Rahab's kindness to the spies was repaid with protection and blessing, and her faith, born in the shadows of fear, became the doorway through which she entered a new life. In time, Rahab's name was remembered not as a woman of shame, but as a woman of faith, written into the very lineage of kings and of the Messiah himself. And thus ended the first part of Joshua's story. The continuation will follow in the next video. As the dust settles over the ruins of Jericho, as the echoes of that great shout fade into history, let your mind rest in the profound truths this ancient story reveals. Here is the God who keeps his promises, who honors faith wherever he finds it, who makes a way when there seems to be no way. Think of Joshua, the reluctant leader who discovered that God's strength is made perfect in human weakness. Consider Rahab, whose simple faith opened the door to redemption. Remember the army that shouted down walls through the power of unified obedience. Feel the peace that comes from knowing that the same God who stopped the Jordan River still moves in the world today, still honors faith, still makes the impossible possible for those who trust in his promises. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in that great company, crossing your own Jordan, facing your own Jericho. Feel the solid ground beneath your feet as you walk through waters made passable by divine power. Hear the sound of walls crumbling before the voice of the God who speaks, and it is done. Rest now in this truth. What God has promised, God will perform. What He has begun, He will complete. The battles that seem impossible to win are already won in the councils of heaven. The walls that appear too high to scale will fall flat at the sound of His voice. Let sleep come gently, carried on the wings of this ancient story that is also timelessly new. Dream of scarlet cords and standing waters, of memorial stones and falling walls, of a God who goes before His people to prepare their way. Rest well, beloved. Your Jordan will be crossed, your Jericho will fall, your promised land awaits. In His time, in His way, by His power, His promises will be fulfilled. Sleep now in the peace of those who know they are loved by the God of the impossible.